This video is more like a recap on the differences between waterfall and agile. The first area of contradiction is the scope. We choose waterfall when the scope of the work is entirely known. We know what we are doing. We know the features and functions we are producing, and we know the procedures of work already. But when what you are doing is quite unknown, okay, and it's not complete, you don't know entirely the full scope of the work because the work itself evolves in branches. Okay, then you go for agile. So we use agile when the scope of the work will evolve with the work. The scope of the deliverable will evolve over time. Then you go for agile. When what you are doing is not fully in the known, you go for agile. For waterfall, requirements are typically fixed and firm. There may be changes, but those changes are quite minimal, okay? The requirements are typically fixed and firm. But for agile project, the requirements evolve. The requirements are highly dynamic. They change from time to time based on changing circumstances, based on changing attributes within the project environment. These requirements adapt to them. These requirements change, okay, over the project life cycle. In waterfall, we use a defined process. We follow procedures, we follow a blueprint, we follow a layout. But for agile project, there is no blueprint to follow. So you utilize empirical procedures, trial and experimentations in order to evolve the solution. But I need to say this. When you work on agile projects, utilizing empirical procedures, trial and experimentations, and you are successful at it, and you now know how to create the solution, do you realize that a blueprint is ultimately created? Yes. So for a project that was initially agile or utilized empirical procedures, the next time around, it will end up using defined procedures because the blueprint has been created. I want to believe that the first time paracetamol was being developed, it used empirical procedures, trial and experimentations. Okay, but once it has been developed, then there is a blueprint. So if whoever developed it can make the blueprint accessible or available to you, then you don't have to go through all of those trial and experimentation nonsense. You can actually follow the blueprint that has been made available to you hassle-free. You understand? So for instance, even for COVID vaccine, which went through trial and experimentations, I believe that they were documenting every stage. Okay, so now that it's been successful, they don't have to go and do trial and experimentations again. So there is now a blueprint. So the next time they are developing the vaccine, they can now follow a blueprint. So you realize that it now shifts more to a waterfall model. Unless perhaps the viruses mutate again, unless they change again in such a way that the vaccines we have now are no longer valid, they are no longer potent enough to address the situation, then they would have to engage another trial and experimentation in order to improve on what they have. We use waterfall for predictive project environment when the work can be predicted. Everything that we do from start to finish can be predicted. But we use agile for highly dynamic environment where you can't predict anything. You don't know what lies ahead of you. Things are evolutionary in nature. Okay, that is when you go for agile. For waterfall projects, the team goes through the project life cycle in a serial linear manner, typically once. So they initiate the project idea, everything about the project idea, they initiate it once. And then they move to the planning stage and plan all aspects of the project. And then once they are done with planning efforts, they move into execution and execute everything. So whatever they created in the plan, they put all of that into action to create everything. Then they move to the closure stage and then hand over everything to the client, hand over the outcome of the project to the client. But for agile projects, I told you things happen in bits. So what happens is that they divide a project into components. Okay, and then they pick the first component, they initiate that. Okay, they plan that component out, they execute that component, and then if it is good, if it fits the expected objectives or the intended solution, it is delivered. That component's outcome is delivered to the client, and that will be a feature increment or a subset of the solution. That's why we say that in Agile, we deliver to the client by installment. So if it is good, we hand over the outcome of that component to the client. If it is not good enough, then we will have to repeat the steps again. This time around with the benefit of lessons learned and feedback gained from the first iteration. Okay, so we keep repeating that until we get it right. Once it is correct and it is what we are looking for, then we release, okay, and tackle the next component. Initiate that, plan that, execute that. If it's good, we release. Then we tackle the next component, initiate that, plan that, execute that, measure the outcome. If it is good, we release. If it's not good, then we'll have to repeat all over again. Okay, like some of you in school in those days, you'll be given work in class, and some of us will be scoring 10-10, and some of you will be scoring 0 and 2 and 1, and then the teacher will say go and do correction. You didn't like that at all. So while some of us were playing all around the place, you were in the classroom doing correction, doing it all over again, something like that. So some of you can even understand this concept better than the rest of us. And you started practicing iteration way back. Do you see? So for agile projects, if the outcome is not good enough, then we'll have to do it all over again for that component. Once it's good, we hand over to the client. So that is how agile projects happen. That's why we say that in agile project we have multiple life cycles. Okay, there are multiple iterations that are performed. For waterfall, there is usually a single delivery of project outcome. I think you can relate to that. There is usually a single delivery of project outcome at the end of the project. But for agile projects, there are multiple releases. There is that experience of feature increments. So the business or the client receives solutions by installment. So each time the deliverable increments at the client's end, whilst the team is working on other components, the client will be experiencing business value on the other end with the little that they have received. Okay, that is how agile projects work. Yeah, so for waterfall projects, because we said that the deliverables are released or handed over typically at the end of the project, that is when we begin realizing business value. That is when the client or the customer begins realizing business value. But for agile projects, business value is realized way earlier because release happens by installment. So just as installments are being released, the client starts realizing business value. And I think this is a bona fide contribution to Agile from the incremental life cycle. Okay, yes. So the illustration I can give you is an office complex that is being put up, and then the ground floor may be completed and then rented out, and then you can start reaping returns on investments, and even the returns that you start receiving, you can use that to complete subsequent floors of the same office complex. You see, so for agile projects, there is the benefit of realizing business value quickly. Now, someone may ask, does it mean that for waterfall projects, you can't realize business value quickly? Why not? You see, this is the point. Project managers are not robots. Okay, you can always leverage on the benefit from other methodologies even when you are not using them. If it works for you, why not? Nobody will get you arrested. It's great. And I have always maintained that no methodology is 100% waterfall, no methodology is 100% agile. That is my point. No framework, no approach is entirely waterfall, no approach is entirely agile. Instead, it is the extent to which a particular approach is inclined towards waterfall or agile that gives its identity. Okay, so there is always a blend, and to me, it's more like a gradient scale. Okay, there is always a blend. So if you are using waterfall and there is something you admire about agile, and it's possible and gives you some peculiar advantages in waterfall, you can incorporate that. And if you are using agile and there is something you admire about waterfall and it's possible, you can incorporate that. Okay, so that's about it. Remember, we are still training for your PMP project management certification. Join us for in-person classes in Ghana. Wherever you are in the world, in Africa, Europe, America, you can also join our online sessions. Remember, we have a very strong and effective post-training system to get you to the finish line. Also get in touch if you want to pursue the Professional Scrum Master certification, the Certified Scrum Master, or the Agile Certified Practitioner. Together, we will write that victory song. Thank you very much and see you in the next lesson.